A reading from the Gospel according to Mark. One Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar was the high priest and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and gave some to his companions. And then he said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for humankind, not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.'" The word of the Lord. So this is one of many examples of Jesus running into a confrontation with the Pharisees and those who believe that adherence to the strict letter of the law is what will keep them on the straight and narrow, so they don't run afoul of God, of course. And while that's very reasonable, Jesus' constant reply to them is that it's more important to understand why the law, not to abolish it, but it's important to understand why the law is what it is, so that you know those times when you're following the spirit of the law, even if it means ignoring the strict letter of the law. This is one such confrontation when Jesus' disciples are both traveling on the Sabbath, which is technically against the rules, and harvesting on the Sabbath, which is also against the rules. And it may seem like at first glance what Jesus is saying is almost a dismissive, well, it was good enough for David, so it's good enough for me. Or King David broke the rules on the Sabbath, and so certainly I can. But I don't think Jesus is being quite so dismissive as that. He instead is actually asking them to think deeply about what is the purpose of the rule, and to remember that the rules of the Sabbath were created to help humankind, as he said, not humankind created to uplift the rules of the Sabbath. So the question for us that it leads me to is thinking through, yes, this idea of sometimes it's very important to follow the rules. The rules are there for a good reason. They're there to help us love each other and love God. That's why we have rules such as we don't run red lights. And the reason we don't run red lights is because it's how we keep one another safe. It's a way of, it's not a rule for rule's sake. It legitimately serves a purpose. But when are there times when following the spirit of the law is more important and it leads us to break the rules? How are we to know the difference? I think in this case, one of the example that we have here is Jesus and his disciples had good work to go out to love, to heal, to teach, and to support, and it meant they needed to feed themselves along the way. Not breaking the rules just for breaking rules' sake, but because breaking that rule of working on the Sabbath was actually going to help them better love God and better love their neighbor as themselves. That's the crucial difference. I think of the very important rule in the pandemic recently when I, in hospital, had to make sure I wore a mask and stay out of certain rooms to not spread disease. That was a really important rule in order to keep other people safe. But then I had an instance of a gentleman who was dying, and I had to go and do the reconciliation of the penitent and hold his hand and pray with him in the last moments of his life. And he wanted nothing else but to just have us take off our masks and see one another and be human to each other in his last moments. And so taking off the mask and being in his presence was technically breaking the rules. But in keeping with the spirit of the law, I think it was the right thing to do, to be there with him in that moment. So as each of us are trying to figure out when we're following the rules and when we're breaking the rules. When is it the right thing to do? I think what I hear Jesus lifting up to us is the important lens of saying, when is what you're doing helping you? When is breaking the rules helping you love God and love each other better? And in that way, if you're using that as your measurement tool, that will help you figure out when it's okay to break the rules here and there to keep with the spirit of the law rather than the strict letter of the law. Amen.